My name is John Weingart. I'm Associate Director of the Eagleton Institute of Politics at Rutgers University, and I have the honor of welcoming you here to this evening, those of you who are in the room and people who are watching this on C-SPAN. It's being filmed for C-SPAN this evening. The Eagleton Institute of Politics is delighted to welcome you to this talk by Stephen Fulop, who was elected this past June as the 49th mayor of Jersey City, and is this year's featured speaker for the Arthur J. Holland Ethics in Government program. Before I introduce our guest, I want to tell you a little bit about the man for whom this event is named. Arthur Holland was elected mayor of the city of Trenton in 1959 and served in that post for almost 30 years. This is a very old campaign button here that says Holland for mayor. He was known for his openness to the public and the ethical standards of his administration. His reputation was such that his colleagues around the country chose him as president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Holland was a Rutgers graduate in the class of 1954 and a graduate student here in political science as well. Shortly after his death in 1989, Rutgers established this program to remember Mayor Holland and to help build from his legacy. Consistent with his life and with the mission of the Eagleton Institute of Politics, the Holland Program on Ethics in Government seeks to promote integrity in public affairs and to improve public policy and government practices by seeking ways to replace cynicism and apathy with awareness, understanding, and action. For the Eagleton Institute, overseeing the Holland program has special resonance because two members of the family are graduates of the Eagleton Fellowship Program. Art's wife, Betty Holland, was in the first class of Eagleton Fellows in 1958, and their son, Matt, was an Eagleton Fellow in 1994, and we are very pleased that both of them, along with Cynthia Holland, are here with us this evening. There are stories to tell about Mayor Holland and his approach to ethics and how he was offered season tickets to the Phillies when he was mayor, and his sons were very disappointed, and maybe his daughters too, that he did not accept them. But his response was, would they have offered me these tickets if I wasn't mayor? And on that basis, he turned them down. And I learned this evening that the same kind of transaction and discussions went on around wedding gifts in his household because he was already mayor when he got married. Let's see, I lost a piece of paper here. Like Art Holland, our guest tonight, Stephen Fulop, has been elected to lead one of New Jersey's major cities. Fulop grew up in Edison, attended SUNY Binghamton, studied abroad at Oxford. He began his career working for Goldman Sachs, first in Chicago and then in Jersey City, and soon after 9/11 he enlisted in the Marines and was deployed to Iraq in 2003, where he received multiple commendations. When Fulop returned home, he went back to school and earned an MBA from NYU and a Master's of Public Administration from Columbia. He also entered Jersey City civic life and became president of the historic Paulus Hook Association and of the Downtown Coalition of Neighborhood Associations. In 2005, he was elected to the City Council, where, like Art Holland, he became known for championing measures aimed at improving ethics in city government, a few of which were actually enacted. When he was elected mayor in 2013, he defeated a two-term incumbent by 14 points in a race that was dominated by debate about ethics in Jersey City government. Though he has been mayor for a little over a half year now, Stephen Fulop is already widely viewed as a major political power in New Jersey and as a voice for effective and ethical municipal government. I want to close with a quote from him, from Mayor Fulop, from a book review he wrote recently for the Star-Ledger. And just having written a book review for the Star-Ledger may distinguish him from many other mayors in the state. The book was by former Rutgers professor Ben Barber. It's called If Mayors Ruled the World. And Fulop wrote, "Without good ideas, there is no leadership. Without leadership, there are no good ideas. And cities are where both occur." It's my pleasure to introduce the mayor of the city of Jersey City, Stephen Fulop.
Thank you. I have some prepared remarks here, but I figured that I'm going to go less from this and more talk about some of the different things that are happening in Jersey City. I know that we have some students here in the front row, so I'll start by, I guess it's American government is the class that we're talking about here. And just so I can get an idea, how many of you all have interest in potentially one day running for office? 2? Bright future we have as a country. And interested in being a part of government? Okay, all right. And the rest of you are just curious or an easy class? Yeah? Well, I will say, just for those of you that are thinking of running, I'll start by saying that I couldn't encourage you more. It really is one of the most rewarding fields and an opportunity to really do something special and really make a meaningful difference in the world and your community and the state of New Jersey. For me, and we'll talk a little bit about it, it was kind of an accidental place that I ended up to that I'm very passionate about. And because I'm passionate about it, I think that became very infectious, and we were able to organize a tremendous number of volunteers to really do something meaningful. So if anything I would start with, I would just say that if you're motivated by this and you're passionate about it, to stay true to it and be aggressive about it, because unfortunately in New Jersey politics, more too often you won't get the invitation to have a seat at the table, and you need to push your way into it. And if you're passionate about it, people will gravitate towards you, and you will be successful. You know, this year we ran a campaign, and it was the only campaign in the entire country that President Obama endorsed in. There were 2 Democrats running, and it was the only election that President Obama made an endorsement in a municipal race in the entire country, as did Mayor Bloomberg, as did Senator Booker, as did Senator Lautenberg. They all were the other guy. And I think that because we were really effective in organizing on the grassroots fronts, we really were able to make a difference and overcome what would seem tough political odds. So I would just start by saying, if you're in this class, I'm not much older than you, so I would say that not too long ago I was in the same situation, and it really is a noble, noble calling in life. So thank you. And you know, I was given the time slot here of 1 hour and 15 minutes. And I see some of you rolling your eyes already, and I haven't even started. You know, I'll say that a quick lesson also for everybody in this room about brevity before I really talk about kind of ethics in government. You know, when I was at Oxford University, they have a thing called the Oxford Union, which is a room similar to this. Oxford has 30 some odd different colleges, and several times during the year they get everybody together into what's called the Oxford Union, and they'll bring in famous actors and athletes and thought leaders from literally around the world. And it generally is 1.5 hour time slot, similar to this. And the normal format is that a speaker speaks for about 15, 20 minutes, and then they engage in a cute question and answer session, and it becomes a dialogue, which is really the best way to learn. And when I was there, one of the speakers was former Secretary of State James Baker. And I don't know if anybody in this room has had the chance to hear him speak, but he is not a short-winded individual. So I will tell you, and this is true, a quick lesson in brevity. About 45, 50 minutes into the lecture, a student in the front row, we were much in the same place as you, started to rustle around and get their jacket together, put his hat on, and James Baker actually stopped the lecture and said, you know, excuse me, young man, you're being extremely disruptive, what could possibly be so important? And it was in a room like this, and the student said, look, I gotta go get a haircut. And James Baker said, look, I'm a little older than you. I don't mean to embarrass you in a room of 200 people, but the right thing to do from a manners standpoint is if you think you need a haircut, you schedule it before or after, so you're not so disruptive in this. And the student, without missing a single beat, said, with all due respect, Mr. Secretary, when this started, I didn't need a haircut. And I tell you, that is a true story. So let me start by saying thank you to Ruth Mandel for inviting me here and having me be a part of this. The Eagleton Institute has really distinguished itself as a premier thought leader in the state of New Jersey, really redefining government and politics, and I don't think it would be possible without her leadership. And I just want to say thank you for having me, and that's the cue. You all could clap. And I do want to say as well that I want to thank us for allowing us to be a part of something that Mayor Holland created a legacy for. And as was touched on in the introduction, Mayor Holland literally redefined how ethics is in government, setting the bar as high as humanly possible. and really setting the stage for what we try to achieve as elected leaders around the state of New Jersey. As mentioned, he was the mayor of Trenton and really distinguished himself because he had the ability to show that government can be effective and at the same time do it in an ethical and responsible manner. And I know his wife is here today and his family is here today, so I just want to say thank you. It really is a privilege to be a part of this today as well. So let me start by saying that, one more thing, I wanted to recognize that there are a couple people here that I saw when I walked in that I do wanted to recognize. I know we have some of our staff here, one of our deputy mayors is here, some of the staff who work in the mayor's office with me, and some of the things we do wouldn't be possible with having a terrific team around. So I wanted to say publicly thank you to them. And in about the 8th road over here, I see a younger couple, and they are the parents of my first friend in life, and they've come over here today as joining. So I just wanted to say thank you to Barbara and Ben Block publicly. So let me start by saying a little bit about my view, and I've been at this 10 years now in government, first on the city council and now in the mayor, and I view myself more as a pragmatic problem solver as my responsibility. And when you think about kind of ideology and ethics from an ideological standpoint, I'll be honest with you that it doesn't really factor much into my day-to-day kind of thought of thinking on how we move the city forward. And that's not to mean that I don't think about ethics, but it's really more of how do we implement responsible ethics. Day in and day out, I'm telling you that I'm thinking about ways to be socially responsible, to improve human well-being, to improve the city going forward, but I don't really define it in a way from an ideological standpoint. I think many of us in the room can really say that you could look at something and say, is that ethical? Does that feel right? Does that look right? And then from there, think about how in a practical way we can implement that. And on the municipal level, it really is special because I think that, as was touched on, whether it was Dr. Barber or Mayor LaGuardia, who was famously quoted, who said there is no Democratic or Republican way to plow streets or pick up garbage or clean sewers. And I think that really speaks to kind of how we view our government. And we don't view it as a way of, from an ideological standpoint, we view it, and that applies to ethics as well, on how to implement responsible, thoughtful government. The lesson on ideology I will share with you on kind of where that came from for me. And when I ran for council 9 years ago, a little bit more than 9 years ago, we ran outside of what was the political machine in Hudson County. And it was a very, very tough race, and few people gave us an opportunity. We literally started with 3 volunteers going door to door. And at that point, my phone rang very, very little with groups that wanted to meet with me. And the first group that actually reached out to me in late January was the Pakistani Muslim community that invited me to a mosque in Jersey City. And I share that with you because while I was excited, I didn't really know what to expect, because one thing that wasn't outlined in my bio is I'm a first-generation American. My family's Holocaust survivors. I went to an Orthodox yeshiva not far from here on the border of Highland Park and Edison. And so for the first community to be reaching out to me was the Pakistani Muslim community. I didn't really know what to expect, but I was really appreciative. And I tell you that I went to a community meeting there, and we sat down in a mosque and we ate, and we talked about things about traffic lights and speed bumps and bullying in schools and education opportunity. And I thought it was a terrific meeting, and I couldn't be happier. And when I left, on my way out, I was heading towards the door, the imam actually says to me, Fulop. He says, in front of everybody, 25 people, he says, it's a very strange name. What kind of name is that? What are you? And, I knew what I should have said at that point, and I was so self-conscious, and I said, I'm Eastern European. And I left, and I was really felt bad about myself, just as a person, that I should have answered with who I am. And I thought that I walked in with ideologically thinking that they would have defined me in a certain way. And I thought that if my grandmother could have heard me in that situation, she would have rolled over in her grave. And so 2 weeks after that, there was a Jewish holiday that's not a really known Jewish holiday. It's known in the Jewish community called Purim, which is it's something, it's similar. People dress up. It's kind of like a Jewish version of Halloween is the way I would describe it. Jewish people know this. I didn't think much of it, and the day before, I get a phone call from the imam who called to wish me a happy holiday and thank me for the meeting. And I share that with you because he was a better man than me, and he recognized the fact that when you think about kind of municipal government and you think about moving things forward that are important, there's not ideological or religious differences. We really have a responsibility to move things forward. Mayor Bloomberg would always talk about the fact that in government, on the municipal level, we don't have the luxury of not performing. Of what you see in the state government or what you see on the federal level is something that we cannot afford to do on the municipal level because we are near our neighbors, we know our neighbors. If the trash isn't picked up, if you don't see a police officer, if the snow isn't plowed, it's not an acceptable excuse overall on how things go. Now, the best ideas on implementing government really comes ultimately from our residents. And I tell you, I see that every single day. When you think about just this 2 months ago, we implemented something in Jersey City called C-Click Fix, which is nothing more than a resident recognizing the fact that delivering effective services was something that technologically Jersey City wasn't at the forefront of. He said that, look, you know, you have all this technology from your desktop to email to putting complaints, but the reality is that most people don't walk around with a desktop computer these days. They walk around with their handheld phones. And it's not a difficult thing to build an app and allow people to communicate and be more effective and communicate in that way. And so we built it. And today, ideas like that are actually generated by residents, and we implement them. And I'm really proud of things like that that really make a difference. So let's talk about a little bit about defining ethical government and how one would relate to ethical government. I don't know if any of the students in the front row over here want to kind of take a shot at what their version of ethical government is before I kind of give mine. Nobody. Not one. Anybody else in the room? We're very shy, I guess. Yeah.
Government that operates without a quid pro quo.
Okay. I would agree with that. Government that operates without quid pro quos. Yeah. I would define this very simple premise as a government that is for the people and by the people. And that would lead you to the inverse of what is unethical government ultimately. It would be a government that is not for the people and not by the people, I think. And then that would beg the simple question of who is that for and how does it operate ultimately? You know, when our founding fathers structured the government we have today, they were very, very aware of the risks of having a government that doesn't operate for the people or by the people, and that's why they put in place many of the checks and balances that you see on the federal level. You see that the judiciary has the responsibility to have a checks and balance on the laws. The executive branch works with the legislative branch, and that operates at the federal level. On the municipal level, I'll say it's a very, very simple process. Our department directors can't move forward without the advice and consent of the municipal council. And what that does is does the best form possible to try and eliminate conflicts of interest. You see conflicts of interest everywhere, unfortunately, and it's something very, very hard to root out and something that we struggle with every single day as we try to implement what I would call ethical government in Jersey City. If you think about one thing that we've implemented recently is redefining something as simple as how we use our off-duty police officers. It's a $10 million business as it relates to assigning off-duty police officers throughout the city, whether it's on construction jobs, whether it's at sewer projects, whether it's on infrastructure projects. When you think about conflicts of interest, you would see that daily, the way it was operating in the city was that you would have a police officer who would assign to his friends those jobs, and it was arbitrary how many jobs they would assign out. And what you would see is construction costs rising, impact as it relates to residents rising, because ultimately that cost is bared by residents as it gets passed through because the cost of the sewer systems obviously are higher. And it's something that we work to correct. And I would say with the help of some of the people in this room earlier in this year, we restructured an entire process to eliminate those conflicts of interest. It's something that we really work in, day out, to kind of try and find a balance of not having those sorts of conflicts of interest. You know, I would say that finding the balance and not usurping kind of the public interest overall of moving things forward isn't always easy. But another way of doing it, and something that I think we're very proud of in Jersey City, is really focused on the transparency component. And it's something that we've tried to do above and beyond any municipality in the state of New Jersey. What we have done once we started 7 months ago is really getting as granular possible as it relates to data. And what we want residents to be able to see is who's checking out or how many books are being checked out from the library during a certain time frame, what's active, what's not active, police locations. And we really want to give data to residents so that they could really understand where their government is being effective, where we're not being effective, and how we are intending on improving that overall. We do the same thing with our budget process. If you look online and you look at the Jersey City budget, you would see it is more granular today than almost any budget in the state of New Jersey. And we strive that. We have a system that's going to be online, I believe this week actually, based on open government, that is really going to get into as much detail as humanly possible in order for residents to really have the ability to understand what we're doing. When you talk about dashboards, that residents can really see every function of government, or you talk about open government over opengovernment.com, really an opportunity to really dig in on transparency front, and I would say operates as another cleanser overall on the ethical government front. So I would say that a third component is really creating a culture in our office that breeds or tries to implement ethical government. And you can implement all the laws in the world, and I think many in this room know this, but there never is kind of an absolute solution to ethical government, because there will always be people that try and struggle to find ways to circumvent those laws that are implemented. What we've tried to do is find people that are the best and brightest and understand where those conflicts may exist. The best example that I think instilled those sorts of culture in me personally is my experience in the Marine Corps that was touched on earlier. If there is ever an organization in the United States that really embodies a culture that lasts through and through beyond one service, it is the Marine Corps. It's a culture of discipline, it's a culture of ethics, it's a culture of honor. And it's the same culture that I think we try to implement every single day in the mayor's office, in our Department of Public Works, in our incinerator authority. Now, finally, I want to talk a little bit about fundraising, and I want to talk a bit about the conflicts that exist around fundraising, and in many ways, I would say, the problem in government today and problem in politics, because that is really an inherent conflict area. Jersey City was one of the first in the state of New Jersey to implement pay-to-play laws, and today we have amongst the strictest pay-to-play laws in the state of New Jersey. Pay-to-play refers to rooting out that special interest money, which basically can be a conflict between those that donate to politicians and those that receive public contracts. It's actually today, we did it when initially the city council and the mayor at the time rejected it. We went out, we gathered petitions, we did the first petition referendum in the history of Jersey City in over 250 years to get that on the ballot and get that implemented. Today, when the state of New Jersey, when Governor Christie sends out to any municipality an application for state aid, it says very clearly on the top of it that that municipality is required to adopt a pay-to-play law substantially similar to the one that's in Jersey City. It's a major accomplishment for us. It's something we worked very hard to do, and I would tell you it's another step in creating a culture of ethical government. So before you can give me a clap, it's okay. So without talking too long, I do want to turn it and open it up to questions and dialogue a little bit more. I'm sure you have questions and thoughts, especially regarding the state of ethics in the state of New Jersey today. And I'm happy to discuss it with you. But I think whether it's from a culture standpoint or whether it's a transparency standpoint or creating checks and balances, really where the opportunity exists today to really move government forward is at the municipal level. As was touched on earlier, Dr. Ben Barber, who was here and said, you know, if mayors ruled the world, which actually is a terrific book, speaks to, not only because of the title, obviously, but he speaks to some of the things that are happening that are really special throughout this country, where federal and state governments are being ineffective. If you think about immigration policies in places like Chicago or Houston, if you think about ID cards in places like New Haven or New York State was looking to implement, there really is a possibility to change at the local level and have an impact far beyond what one would think. Jersey City, I'm proud, on that front, is doing some substantial different things on gun reform as it relates to how we procure our procurement policies for our police department and what type of socially conscious and corporate responsiveness partners we have that procure our ammunition, our guns from our police department. Our police departments across this country are the biggest purchasers of weapons outside of the military, and there's an opportunity to really reshape the conversation overall. So with that, I will open it up to questions, say thank you for taking time out of your busy calendar to have a discussion about ethics in government. Thank you.
Two mics that my colleague Amanda and I will pass around the room, and especially students first, we'd like to give you priority.
Thank you, Mayor Fulop, for coming to Rutgers. So my question is, how would you say the freeholder board has been cooperative with you in achieving the ethics, as you say? Because the freeholder board, as you might know, has much power over tax abatements and giving corporations, specifically for Jersey City, on the water shore. So what would you say, how cooperative have they been? Have they warmed up, and are they willing to move into the ethical procedure for Jersey City? Thank you.
We have a different culture in Hudson. Let me talk a little bit about the political structure there for a second. Each county in the state of New Jersey has a different process on how they elect their freeholders, their state assembly, their state senate, and their representatives. Some have open conventions like Bergen County. Some have an executive director that have the opportunity to just self-select who are those representatives. And others have processes where the mayors actually implement a vote to select who are the freeholders and who are the state assembly and who are the state senators. In Hudson County, it's the direction of the executive director of the Hudson County Democratic Organization that generally selects that. What we've found is that they defer a lot to the mayors. We are doing our best to put a team in place there that is going to be as cooperative as possible with some of the things that we're looking to implement, which are some of the similar reforms that you've seen on the local level. And so after this year, when some of that change is implemented, I think that after this election in June and then subsequently in November, I think we're going to have partners there that are going to be more willing to work within some of the things that are important to Jersey City. Yeah. So.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for fighting the Port Authority in your city. And that kind of leads into my next question. It's not about ethics necessarily, but when do you think that the transit system in New Jersey, especially with NJT, Amtrak, the PATH, and the Port Authority, will finally come into light so we can have a decent discussion on how we can change how commuters in this state have been treated?
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk a little about mass transportation in Jersey City to start. We are fortunate to have one of the best mass transportation systems in the state of New Jersey within Jersey City. We have a PATH infrastructure, we have a ferry infrastructure, we have a bus infrastructure. The gentleman referenced a lawsuit and our difficulties with the Port Authority. We have a $400 million lawsuit pending with the Port Authority over unpaid taxes and unpaid bills. But outside of that minor hiccup, we're optimistic about some of the things that we're discussing with both New Jersey Transit and the Port Authority. We're in discussions with them as it relates to additional path stops where the path goes above ground, recognizing that you could energize the entire other side of the city with a simple platform. We're also in conversations with New Jersey Transit and some of the mayors in Bergen County about actually extending the Hudson-Bergen light rail into Bergen County. So you could actually encourage mass transportation beyond what we see on the Hudson waterfront alone. What we've seen since the Hudson-Bergen light rail started was a steady increase in ridership, and you've seen a steady increase in development directly along the rail rides. So I think it makes all the sense in the world outside of just the transportation advantages. You really see investment around there as well. We're working on it from our side. Some of the stuff is beyond local controls on that specific issues, but we are as strong as advocates as possible, both with New Jersey Transit and legally, as has been documented. Yes?
I'd like to welcome you, Mayor, as a Rutgers alumni and Hudson County resident. I'm proud to have you here. I'm proud to call you a neighbor. I'd like to pivot my message a little bit towards the inequality message that is currently out there. We hear a lot about Mayor Bill de Blasio of New York City addressing inequality. However, in Jersey City, you've addressed paid sick leave for small companies. I believe it's over 5 employees.
10, yeah.
10. And you've also supported the minimum wage and been involved in many other progressive issues like gun control and things that affect urban areas. I'm wondering what motivated you to do so, and what are some other policy issues addressing inequality that may surface in the future?
So we'll talk about that for a second. Jersey City was the first in the state of New Jersey this year to implement paid sick leave, and thank you. And it was prompted by my belief that a family member, a mother, shouldn't have to choose between the well-being of her child or somebody in her immediate family and her employment. And I think many people could say that's a fairly reasonable thing to say. And we went through the conversations with the business community, trying to find a fair balance. When you look at the other 5 cities in this country that have paid sick leave, you've seen the business community say some of the same concerns. And when you look back a year after that, whether those concerns were warranted, you found that that wasn't the case. Same thing with minimum wage, actually. And I really think that minimum wage acts as an accelerator for the economy in the entire area. When you look at the current minimum wage, and if you look at what President Obama is actually advocating for, you would see, and the wage of the last time that it was changed, you would see prior to this change in New Jersey, you would see that relative to inflation, the minimum wage and what people are making has actually decreased. And when you think about some of the employers and where these people are working, they're not high schoolers, they're not teenagers. I see it every single day that these are parents, that these are grandparents that are actually struggling. One campaign that's happening right now that some of you may know is actually at the airport as it relates to Newark Airport. And those workers, thousands upon thousands, I believe the number is 4,000 actually, they're all paid minimum wage. And they struggle every single day. They work 40+ hours a week. And you could imagine how those struggles work to actually move a family forward. We had, last week, we had the Secretary of Labor, Perez, come from the Obama administration. And he did a roundtable discussion with Senator Booker and myself and some of the people who are actually impacted by the minimum wage. And when you hear the stories about people telling their children, 16-year-old birthday, that I'll get you a birthday present when I have some money and hopefully things pick up, it really is heartbreaking. And you really start to understand what is happening in this country as it relates to income inequality. And so when you look at a place like Jersey City, I recognize that we have a lot of advantages because of our location, because of our size, proximity to New York, our culture, our open space, our history. We have a lot of reasons why I can tell you for certain that we will lead the state of New Jersey in job creation, that we will lead the state of New Jersey in construction permits, that we will lead the state of New Jersey in new development. And at the same time, we can do all that stuff and encourage that stuff by still being responsible and trying not to leave anybody behind. You know, as was touched on earlier, you know, it's one of my core belief in the Marine Corps. Thank you. You know, we talk about as a core belief in the Marine Corps, never leave a person behind. And I believe government, there is a responsibility for us to be thinking of ways to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to succeed. And so we're implementing those things in Jersey City, and we're doing it in a responsible way. Anything else? Yes.
Hi. Following up on this last question and your answer, I'm from Trenton. My name is Jeff Laurenti. And we knew in Art Holland with high ethical standards, and as folks who've read the newspapers over the past weekend know, we have fallen considerably in terms of integrity in local government. And it in part reflects the 50-year change in demographics and the fast-paced impoverishment of our town. 50 years ago, Jersey City looked to be headed in the same direction. It was one of the first cities in the country to experience what became over 5 years, annual summer riots. And yet, because, as you say, of its location, it has now become an outpost of the West Village, or of a kind of upwardly mobile population in Newport City and elsewhere. You have these wonderful new immigrant groups adding diversity to the mosaic. How is the city integrating these different sides with the traditional poor urban population? What is the impact in your school system of the new groups that you have? Do they even use these public schools? And how will Jersey City be a beacon for our other poor towns that don't have the New York City advantages of proximity that Jersey City has? Looking to the future, where do you see Jersey City leading the rest of urban and increasingly impoverished New Jersey?
A lot to that question. So let me start by saying that Jersey City will be the most, the largest city in the state of New Jersey. We estimate in late 2015, early 2016, based on our growth rates. We are also one of the most ethnically diverse cities in the entire country. In our public school system, we have over 72 languages spoken, which speaks to really the diversity of Jersey City. We're the home of Ellis Island, the gateway, the doorway, the golden door to America. And that golden door name is really because it is the name for a golden opportunity. That doorway represents an opportunity, which really is the immigrant experience, which is Jersey City, which in many ways is the belief in this country, and I would say what I would view as the democratic experience as well. When you think about Jersey City and what things we've done, we have structured our incentives programs, our tax abatements, everything that we use as far as tools, our redevelopment bonds, to move development into the inner portion of the city. So you're moving market rate development into the inner portion of the city, and we've actually incentivized affordable housing into the waterfront area. And you're seeing it working because we're trying to create more diverse neighborhoods. So it's something that I'm very conscious of, to be honest with you, and it's something that we've tried to implement policies that are actually going to move the city in that direction. A month ago, we broke ground on a 54-story tower in Journal Square. It'll be the first Journal Square development in the heart of the city in probably the last 25 years. And at the same time, we're seeing still the development on the waterfront. We broke ground last week in December on a 69-story tower, which will be the largest residential tower in the state of New Jersey, and that'll be on the Jersey City waterfront. So we're using all sorts of tools possible. We're very conscious of those disparity from a development standpoint, and we're putting tools in place. You know, the Jersey Journal, who's here today, recently we had an editorial board with them and had an opportunity to go through what we're doing on the policing front. One of the first hires that I made as the mayor was we did a national search for a public safety director, aggregating the fire department and the police department under one umbrella, because I viewed there was a real opportunity for shared services between the two of them from a technology, from an administrative standpoint, to save some dollars, and from a grant standpoint. And we went out and we sought what we would think was the best and brightest possible. And we settled on one of Ray Kelly's senior people in the NYPD. And he has done tremendous work on really digging into data, and we're starting to deploy our resources into those areas. Recently, people have asked whether, well, if you're deploying the resources based on that area, does that mean that I'm going to have less resources in, let's say, the downtown area? And some of that's true. You will. But you know, I really view it at the end of the day as one city, and a mugging or a break-in or a shooting on the south side of the city has an impact downtown, and how people perceive Jersey City, what they think of Jersey City. So it really is one problem ultimately, and we're using data to solve those in some of the challenging areas. And then finally, on the diversity component, we have modeled after what Chicago and New York did, and we have an Office of Diversity and Inclusion that actually is as proactive as possible with our Coptic community, our Egyptian community, our Pakistani community, very close to my heart, as I mentioned earlier, our Hispanic community, and really providing them all the tools necessary to know what resources we have as government in order to help them move forward. So it's something that we talk about all the time. Question in the back.
From one of our students over here, if that's all right.
Yeah,
and
sure.
If you would please just introduce yourself, tell us your name and where you're from, so the mayor knows who he's speaking.
Sure. Hi, my name is Ian Liberty. I'm a graduate fellow here at Eagleton. Originally from East Brunswick, although I live in Newark now, and I'm an intern at the Jersey City Law Department. I'm a little surprised that it's taken this long for someone to ask a question about Governor Christie, but that's what mine's about.
I'm surprised too.
So, I mean, a lot of the heat that he's getting right now has to do with things that has happened during his campaign, not necessarily related to his actual policies in office. I'm wondering if there's a difference, at least in your opinion, between ethical behavior on a campaign versus ethical behavior when you're governing, and what the relationship between those two things is.
I think it's a good question. I think there is 100% overlap. It becomes more difficult the higher the position that you're in, because you have more influence, as is evident by the governor's situation, to impact resources that are given to an individual. In Jersey City, we are very, very conscious of trying to separate our politics from our government. When we have our political meetings, who we have our political meetings with, where they're located, doing our best to separate that there should never be that conflict. I make it a policy to never have a meeting without one of our lawyers or somebody there present, to make sure that somebody doesn't say something that's relatively inappropriate, recognizing that in today's world, you have to be very clear and say, no, that's not acceptable. Many people have been indicted and convicted for just sitting there and not saying, no, that's not acceptable. So there is overlap. Right? We're extremely conscious of the overlap. We do everything possible, I think, to create safeguards, but it's not perfect, because what you'll see is that people come to City Hall, they'll sit in my office, and they'll say something that's fairly inappropriate. And we do our best to correct them, but it's tough. It really is tough. And I think that it became harder for me as a mayor versus what it is from the city council, because I have more influence over different components that impact people directly. Yes? You'll go next.
40 years ago,
First,
I thought...
Do you want? We'll let him go first, and then you.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for coming to the university. My name is Vincent Caggiano. I'm a native New Yorker, so my question may not be relevant as of now. But since you're talking about ethics, I would like to know your opinion as a fellow mayor. Do you think it was ethical how Mayor Bloomberg extended his term limits so he could remain mayor?
I think the answer is no. And I think, I think Mayor Bloomberg did a lot of terrific things for New York. I think many people in this room would acknowledge that. I think that was a mistake, and I think probably in hindsight, he would probably acknowledge it was a mistake. Unethical, ethical, it's a very hard thing to define. I would say that the process that undertook, where the people clearly stated that this is something that they wanted, term limits, and it was something that was changed just for that situation, would probably raise a flag. But it's just one person's opinion. Mrs. Holland.
Yeah. I hope it's
Just one second.
Sorry. I hope it's appropriate for me to ask a question. I mean, you're a very appealing mayor and gentleman.
Thanks.
Very articulate, well-educated, and you have a strong ethical base. But you know that you come from a city that has a long history of corruption. And there have been reform mayors before who have risen and then left office. It's said that you are being considered for a higher office. I mean, if you only complete one term, can the standard that you have set in that one term survive into another? You know, can you really undo? It just seems to be in the water in Jersey City, as they say. And so I'd like to know if you think that the influence that you have will have a longevity to it.
So let me start by saying that I wake up every day excited to do my job. And it is flattering that people talk about me and our administration about the potential moving forward, especially in light of some of the things that are happening on the state level. I tell you that as sure as I am standing here, that our team wakes up, me personally, very enthusiastic. Every day is literally something different. And that's really what I love about the job. And I think that that passion is the reason that I've been able to attract some really great people to work alongside me. If my political career was to end being the mayor of Jersey City, I would be perfectly satisfied and know that we've made a meaningful difference in a large urban area. So per your point on it's in the water, I will tell you that Jersey City does have a very colorful history. You know, the mayor's office, we put it in storage. Mayor Haig's desk was in Jersey City up until 4 months ago. And the interesting thing about Mayor Haig's desk, who served as mayor of Jersey City for 30 years, from the Great Depression through the 50s, and he was known as really the founder in this country of political bossism. And while he had an $8,000 salary, he died with millions upon millions in the bank. And his desk, which stayed in Jersey City up until 4 months ago, has a button on the mayor's side that opens a drawer on the other side, and you could drop the money in, and you could hit the button again, and it comes back in. It's really an amazing, amazing invention. And we put it in storage. But there's a cultural thing. And I think that one of the reasons, to be honest with you, why that exists in Jersey City, if you really think about it, is because I think Jersey City is a very, very large city, or a medium-sized city. large for the state of New Jersey, but it really doesn't have its own media market. So we're in the shadow of New York City, in the shadow of Philadelphia, and that's really a problem for, I think, New Jersey overall. And without kind of that transparency, right, and without that huge media market focused on New Jersey, you have a lot of things happen that maybe wouldn't happen elsewhere, maybe, for example, in New York. So do I think that we could change the culture? I 100% do think so. It's never perfect, but we work on it every day. I think we have a great team that really strives to do the best thing. And I think that we've encouraged a lot of new people to get involved in politics and government, whether on the Board of Education or if you look at our city council, which is the majority of those people, it's the first elected office they've ever held. And I think that you will see people that have a different view about public service as opposed to self-service. Yes, you want the gentleman in the back?
Congratulations on election as mayor of Jersey City. 40 years ago, I taught at Jersey City State College, which was a different type of environment. I'm a little concerned, and I think history will bear this out. You have something in common with Governor Corzine, who was the governor of the state of New Jersey, Robert Rubin, who was Secretary of Treasury under Bill Clinton, and Mayor Bloomberg. All four of you came out of Wall Street. It doesn't make sense to me why a young, aspiring Wall Street investment banker who on the leaflet that was released by Rutgers didn't list that he was an investment banker at Goldman Sachs, Sanford Bernstein, and it's a very diversified city. So the question I have for you, Mayor, is a very simple question. Is this going to be a tale of two cities? Because the incumbent mayor now in New York City is trying to change the tale of two cities. I have visited friends in Jersey City, and it looks like it's becoming a tale of two cities. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So on all of my bio stuff, it talks about Goldman Sachs and Sanford Bernstein, and it's something I'm actually very proud of. And I'm proud of it because if you understand my background and my family's background, my family had a deli in Newark. My family's still in Newark every day for the last 45 years. My mother has an immigration services building. So when I went through college and graduate school and got a job at a place like Goldman Sachs, which was regarded as the most prestigious investment bank in the world, it was something to be proud of at the time. And if you would have told me 10 years ago that working at Goldman Sachs would be a scarlet letter in many ways, I would have said you're crazy. But you know, I don't view it today that where you have an industry of millions of people that work around the world, that every single one of them is bad because they work in an industry. It's not a fair characterization by any stretch of the imagination. You know, my choice at the time was, as was outlined earlier, I left after 9/11 to enlist in the Marine Corps. I was very, very happy at my job, and at the same time I was happy in the Marine Corps because I recognized the service there. And I don't think it's fair to brush one stroke on every single person who works in an individual field. Our track record for our administration in Jersey City, I would say, is second to none, really, as it relates to certain policy issues which you touched on. We touched on family sick leave earlier, prevailing wage ordinances, as we're shifting our police department, as we're incentivizing development in other areas of the city. I think that people in Jersey City would tell you that they're very, very proud today and think that we are working as hard as humanly possible to bridge that gap. During the campaign, I recognized the fact that I have a hill to climb because people have those sort of stigmas, and it's okay. I understand it. And not everybody's going to vote for me. I understand that too. And we work every day to try and earn their trust. And so in Jersey City, it's a very progressive place, and there are a lot of people who have views like you do as it relates to financial services, and I understand that. And we work every day to say, yes, you can have those views about some of those people that work there, not all of them, some of them, and we want you to view our administration as one that really works proactively to move things forward and not have that tale of two cities.
Of ethics that it imparted. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that culture and how it's affected your approach to governance.
What was the first part? I didn't hear the first part.
The culture of ethics in the Marines.
Well, the culture of ethics. So first I would talk about our hiring practices overall. We try to do our best to interview and understand people's motivations for being in different types of positions, because not humanly possible for me to be a check and balance on every single person out of the 3,000 employees that we're responsible for. So that's kind of first and foremost. Number two is we have all of our board members and we have our directors and our management employees go through ethics training. We do it once a year to make sure that they understand what requirements are, what types of things that they should be looking for, what they need to do as far as responding to that. And when you put those safeguards in place, the reality is still people will make mistakes, but we try our best to create an environment where people understand it's something important to us, leadership there, and we want it to be important to them as well. Question in the back? Oh, okay, sure. Go ahead.
I have a question. I read somewhere Jersey City is the most diverse city in the state and one of the most diverse cities in the United States. Now, I was reading, you were featured in the New Jersey Monthly magazine, and in it was saying how there's a friction between the long-established working-class families and the new young urban professionals, and you yourself, you're not originally from Jersey City. My question is, how are you able to appeal to those people, especially since there is a friction between the young urban professionals that are flooding in from New York City and the working class families, and how are you able to appeal to those people who might view you as an outsider or somebody who's not from their economic?
I think you cut on some of the dialogue in the campaign. I was painted as a Wall Streeter. I was painted as an outsider. I was painted as somebody who wasn't born and raised in Jersey City, despite the fact that I was there for 14 years. Our position in the campaign was that we did our best to be as granular as possible on information on policies that we intend to implement once elected. Now, if you think about most campaigns on every level of government, they'll say things like, we intend to hire more police, we intend to make the streets safer, right? And they don't really get into how you're going to do that. If you look at our policing plan, for example, you would see that it was 9 pages in detail, how we're going to pay for it, how we're going to structure the police department, everything we were going to do. And not that everybody cared to read 9 pages, but we wanted you to understand that we had a plan and we were willing to take a risk. Now, most people politically don't put out those sort of plans for the reason that once you put it there, there's exposure politically, right? And our take on it was that if we give you more information and you take the time to read it, and some people will take the time to read it, they'll understand whether you're in the born and raised area or a new area or a Hispanic area or an Indo-American area or a Pakistani area, that we actually have a plan that will impact them day in and day out. And I think that really ended up being the difference where we ended up getting a lot of support in people, because we actually put forward meaningful ideas in detail, and people could understand how we are going to get from where we started to kind of where we want to end at the end of 4 years. And I think that really made a huge difference for us.
I think we have a student question here.
Hi, Mayor Fulop. My name is Sam Fogelger, and I'm a student at the College of New Jersey. So like my friend Jeff Laurenti, I'm a Mercer County resident. And the recent conviction of Tony Mack is, I think, very problematic for a lot of reasons. One being that to a degree, it could have been seen through the election of 2010 if voters were more careful looking at some of his personal and political decisions in the past. These are things that possibly could have been tracked. So I think it begs the question, especially on the municipal level, of why do people vote? Why do people vote specifically for a specific candidate? Is it because they're qualified for the job? Is it because they remember them as captain of the basketball team 25 years ago? And so I think the real question is, what is a municipality's obligation to making sure that citizens value civic responsibility, and making sure, not just putting out the information, but making sure that they take advantage of that information and in turn make sure they actually hold their government accountable?
Okay, so couple components to that. Let me start by talking about Board of Education elections in Jersey City, because somebody touched on the education system a little earlier. Recognized about 4 years ago that in order to really improve Jersey City, we really need to focus on the education system, because there was a trend there that a lot of people were moving to Jersey City, wanted to stay in Jersey City. Once they had young families, they felt they needed to leave because of the education system. So we really started organizing voters around the education process and the Board of Education. Now, historically in Jersey City, you could win a Board of Education seat with about 2,200 votes. It's a city of about 300,000, between 270, 300,000 people. And you could win a Board of Education seat that impacts a $600 million budget with 2,200 votes. We started organizing around candidates that were parents, that didn't have the same necessarily conflicts as somebody who has a political motivation, as opposed to somebody who just has a motivation because their child is in the schools and they need to make decisions around what is best for their individual child. And it took a while to actually find candidates and to create a screening process done by other parents. And the commitment was, because we were able to organize a lot of volunteers for my council race, that I would do the best to raise money and to organize around those respectable Board of Education candidates. So we changed the dynamic there, that you would be getting elected now with 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 votes, so literally doubling the voter turnout in Board of Education elections by energizing people door to door, having better candidates, communicating better, et cetera. That said, while I tell you it's something to be proud of, it still is only 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 people out of a city of 270,000 people. In my election, we won with 21,000 votes, I believe was the number, 22,000 votes, and the mayor at the time had 16,000. And unfortunately, a lot of the times on municipal races, people vote not based on ideas, they vote based on who they know, their neighbor. It's a very personal relationship as it relates to the mayor. So it's a challenge that we had there. You know, who's the better singer? Who's the better person out there in the public, right? I'm not a good singer. My opponent was. But those sort of things really, really kind of impact somebody on the personal level, unfortunately. And a lot of the time, ideas don't matter. And what you'll actually see is the person who is the best candidate or the most qualified candidate doesn't always win. And you'll see it in places like Trenton and other places around the state. You'll see time and time again. You'll see demographic, racial politics factor into it. You'll see that personal component factor into it, things that probably shouldn't matter in the scope of things, but that's really what impacts it.
I think we have another student question over here, if that's okay.
Thanks for joining us tonight, Mayor Fulop. My name is Judith, and I'm an undergraduate associate at Eagleton this year. Just this morning in our class with Professor Weingart, our class was wrestling with the idea of transparency in politics. So I think we were all very gratified and very appreciative to hear about your reforms in terms of transparency, in terms of data with your libraries and the police system. Yeah. What we were discussing this morning, though, was transparency in terms of not just the policies themselves and the data, but the process of getting policies passed, passing legislation, and deciding which reforms to pursue. So my question to you would be, in terms of this kind of transparency, what level of transparency would you believe is appropriate to present to the public? Thank you.
My personal belief is that the more information I could push out, the better, okay? And we're exploring different partnerships right now, for example, talking about police, with how we communicate police infractions, okay? So if you think about it today, many people still listen to the police scanner, they'll wait for the local newspaper and see what happens in their respective neighborhoods. And we're kind of working with technology right now to explore ways that when you enter different zones within the city, it'll actually push out to your respective phone the types of crimes that happen there almost in real time, okay, so that you'll know the things that are happening in a respective vicinity over there. Now, initially, the thought process, you go to the website and kind of check off the different types of crimes that you're concerned about. And the way I looked at it is that initially, the person is going to check off everything. And then their phone will go crazy, right? And because it's a large city. And then they'll start to pare down what really is relevant to them information-wise. It's information that's accessible anyway today. So we figure that we might as well be more forthcoming with it, giving it to people so they could make more decisions with it. My personal view, going back to your question, is the more information that I could provide you, the better. Yes? Oh, in the back, we'll go in the back first and then you. Is that okay?
Sure.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Frank Romano. I'm a teacher at Lincoln High School in Jersey City. And my question is, considering the fact that personally I'm the department chairperson of 2 departments, despite only being my 3rd year, I'm kind of capped as to where I can go. What can I do in your administration to get involved in my community? And if there's no specific ways right now, how can Jersey City become a leader throughout New Jersey in ensuring that ambitious young people with bright ideas and a lot of energy have an opportunity to go about making change?
It's a good question. You know, our best asset in that last campaign, we had less money and obviously less endorsements, as I touched on earlier, was that we had a tremendous volunteer base, tremendous, hundreds upon hundreds of people that dedicated their time day in, day out to moving us forward. So despite the endorsements on the other side and money, you really saw kind of a grassroots movement that really pushed us forward. We are putting together now an office within our resident response center that will focus on kind of volunteerism, knowing that there are a lot of people that want to be involved in the community and creating a place where they can come, understand what non-for-profits are looking for resources, what opportunities the city has in of itself where volunteers can get more actively involved, whether it's shoveling a senior citizen's snow, okay, or whether it's doing something at the Liberty Humane Shelter close to Liberty State Park. There's a lot of opportunities, and we're putting it together right now in office that will really act as a clearinghouse for all that. We sent out an email to get people to sign up initially for this, and we had a little bit more than 100 volunteers initially, which speaks to people exactly like you that are willing to donate their time for a good cause. And I 100% intend on capitalizing on the free labor. Yes.
Yes, my name is Beth Heyer, and I'm involved with the League of Women Voters of New Jersey. And I'd like to go back to the comment you made a couple of questions ago when you were talking about looking at why people vote for the candidates that they vote for. What, in your view, are you doing in Jersey City, and what could we be doing statewide to make sure that voters are, in fact, informed about the issues and vote knowledgeably, actually vote, that's the first thing, but then also vote with a knowledge of the issues?
Ooh, if I had the solution to that, I mean, I think it's a real challenging issue everywhere. It's a challenging issue in Jersey City. We spent probably a little bit less than $2 million on our race on our side alone. And still, voter turnout was what I mentioned earlier, so those challenges exist. It would be very hard to be a resident in Jersey City during the time of the election and not know that there was a mayoral campaign going on from a house-to-house standpoint. I tend to think that a lot of times people vote on things that really are less of substance, unfortunately, and the more we try to educate them, still people tend to gravitate towards things that really aren't as meaningful in moving the dialogue forward. As I touched on, sometimes gender, sometimes race, sometimes who your neighbor is, sometimes geographic location, and it's very hard, and I still have that challenge, and I really don't have a good answer for you long term. We're working on it. We had a question in the back. Yes?
Hi, my name is Karina Wilkinson. I'm a former organizer with Food and Water Watch, and I want to thank you for your opposition to the Spectre pipeline that's now in service between Jersey City and Manhattan. 42-inch pipeline, gas pipeline going under the Hudson. And I know that Jersey City attorney is going to argue now.
I think yesterday.
Or there's some arguments coming Thursday, but the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is just approving these pipelines right and left all over the country for natural gas and oil and very destructive projects. How can municipalities, and what is your attorney arguing, how can we reform the process so that localities have more of a say in these projects?
It's actually, I don't know what we can do at the municipal level as it relates to municipalities having more input in the process. The way this generally works is that there's a federal board called FERC, which you touched on, the Federal Energy Regulation Committee, which decides and approves these pipelines throughout the country. And when you talk about ethical government overall, FERC, as that board is called, is a great example of conflicts that exist. Every single person on that board served formerly in the oil and gas industry, right? So there's an inherent conflict there to begin with. When you look at last year's approvals of pipelines in this country, it was close to, I believe, I don't think they rejected one, to be honest with you. It was 100% approval rate. So when you think about conflicts and where to start on reforming the process, it would be creating some, parameters around who and what can serve on those types of boards, that they could actually be honest brokers looking at a project based on need and not just based on kind of financial windfall for whichever respective company is applying. I would say that's the starting point, and that's really one of our arguments when we in front of FERC, in front of the federal courts that we're in front of now. Yes, in the back.
Hi, my name is Brian Rock. I'm a social studies teacher in East Orange. So I wanted to go back to your comments before about school board politics, because there's a Newark mayoral race heating up right now. Education is really the focus of that. There's a lot of contention over Cammie Anderson and her appointment as the state superintendent. So as the mayor of another large city, I was wondering about your thoughts on that. State control of Newark schools, and would it help Newark if they got local control back?
Let me say that I don't get too involved in the Newark dynamic. The Jersey City school system was the first to be under state control in the late 80s. So we had part of it delivered back to us about 4 years ago, and we're in discussions and hope to get the remaining portion of it. About a year and a half ago, we hired a new superintendent of schools, Dr. Marcia Lyles, who was the deputy chancellor under Joe Klein in New York City. We have a whole new board of education there. We're working in partnerships to be the first in the state of New Jersey to be building public pre-K facilities, which we're very proud of. We're working hand in hand, and I think that Jersey City has a lot of terrific stories on the education front. One data fact that I bet you many people in this room don't know: the best high school, or number 2, every single year in the state of New Jersey is where? In Jersey City, New Jersey. Public high school, McNair Academic High School. And we usually go back and forth. That's right. And we usually go back and forth with Milburn, actually. So there are a lot of great stories in Jersey City. I think that local controls, as it relates to Jersey City, would be a huge benefit. And the reason I say that is because I think that it would be an affirmation from the state that we are making progress. We have more parents engaged than ever, as I touched on from a voter standpoint. We are short-spaced, predominantly on younger years right now. That's why I touched on the pre-K facility. We are the only urban district in the state of New Jersey that is growing, and we're seeing 20% growth projected in the next 5 years. So it really is a great story on a lot of fronts. And it would be hard for me to really get into the details of what's happening in Newark, but I can tell you from the Jersey City standpoint, we are pushing for local control. We think local control is important, and we think we're on track, and we think it's something attainable. Now there's obviously, other things that the state government's been focused on, but we thought that, it's a conversation that really the time is right for Jersey City for that. Yes. Yeah.
I just want to do a time check that we've got about 5 minutes left,
Okay.
so maybe 2 more questions.
I'm gonna heed the brevity thing. So thank you for coming, Mr. Mayor, and I'm glad that you mentioned McNair and education. But I'm a former resident of Jersey City, but there's also schools like Lincoln and Snyder, which are not in the same caliber as McNair. Yep. And I want to go back to tax abatements were mentioned, and I've recently learned that there's a loophole with tax abatements given to corporations, that the municipality takes a lion's share while schools are cut out outright and the counties get very little of the funds. Wouldn't you think that schools ought to be a priority in allocation of funds with anything collected? Because given the institutional design of American education, the municipality has the heaviest burden of funding schools.
Yeah. So a couple of things on that. The funding formula in places like Jersey City and what was formerly known as the Abbott districts is very different than, let's say, using Milburn as an example. How we deal with the state, what requirements are there. When you look at the funding for places like Jersey City as an example, it is amongst the highest per pupil costs in the state of New Jersey. You're talking in excess of $21,000, $22,000 per child to educate them in the Jersey City school system that I think many in this room would say still needs work, as in we're working to improve it. It would be a hard-pressed statement to say that the reason that we have struggles in the Jersey City school system is because of funding. It's just not the case. The dollars aren't the ultimate problem there. There's a lot of socioeconomic issues that impact students that we struggle with. So you think about out-of-school time that we are working aggressively to deal with. After-school programs, we are working aggressively to deal with. One thing that Vivian, the deputy mayor in the front row, is working on is expanding our summer youth initiative aggressively, partnering with the corporations on the waterfront. So when you think about kind of how we are incentivizing development there, what types of tools we're using, and the impact on the school system, I would say that there hasn't been a direct impact from one to the other. And because if you look at the funding formula for Jersey City, it would be a stretch to say that dollars are the cause of the problems. Yes?
Just a reminder, Mayor Fulop, this will be our last question.
Okay.
Hello, Mayor. I'm Tamara Bush. I live in Monroe, New Jersey. Jonathan Bush says hello to you.
Okay, great.
I downloaded your app. It's fantastic, and I believe that everybody should take a look at it because I live in Monroe. It would be wonderful to have this kind of technology available for us.
I'll give you that payment we discussed later.
Thank you.
I'm just kidding, I'm just kidding. Ethical government, ethical government.
Exactly. Well, speaking of ethical government, I am in technology, and I am in technology sales. What parts of technology would you like to implement in Jersey City? And what things do you believe technologically are unethical, such as spying or webcams or cameras around the city?
Well, I mean, things that are discussion, drones and those sort of things, obviously I wouldn't be supporter of. We have an aggressive CCTV camera system throughout Jersey City, as many urban areas do, as New York City does. It's something that we invest in where as possible. We haven't seen that type of investment in the last 2 or 3 years because of funding difficulties, but we've seen that it actually works as a preventative tool for crime on the CCTV front. We are exploring what's going on with our red light cameras, whether it's something that we want to continue to implement or if it's something that we think has been misused, more of a revenue generator. It's something we're exploring on that front. Outside of that, I would tell you, as I touched on earlier over here, data is something that we continue to push and to share as much as possible. We think the more open we can be from a technology standpoint, the better it is. That's why we have a whole team that literally digs into that open government framework that I touched on, the dashboard that I touched on earlier. Those are things that I think are fundamentally at our core, that the more we can share and the more we can open is from a technology standpoint, it's better for the city and better for residents. And I just want to say again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for taking time out of your busy calendars. I really appreciate it.